All right, Republicans, here's your wake-up call. It is time to wake up. It is time to accept the reality that this is going to be a very tough midterm election, and the stakes are about as high as they can get for a midterm. Let's look at what's at stake before we get into the news of the shocking defeat last night in Florida. Here's what's at stake. If the Republicans lose control of the Senate, which is less likely, but still very, very possible, if the Republicans do lose control of the Senate, then the president's ability to get anyone confirmed, his ability to get any reconciliation bills passed, his ability to govern outside of executive order, which is fleeting and never lasts, becomes pretty much nil. The final 2 years of his presidency will be at best meaningless. Okay, that's the best case scenario. Of course, the worst case scenario is if Democrats take control of the House and the Senate, and then they start, of course, finding some excuse to impeach him once, twice, three times, however many times they need, with the possibility that, given the stakes, given what's happening in the United States, I would not put it as an impossibility that they might be able to actually achieve their goal of fully impeaching President Trump. Then, of course, there's the filibuster. Now, if the Senate is taken, if Democrats take control of the Senate, they will remove the filibuster, period. Done. The only possible chance that they would have, or that we would have, of them not removing the filibuster and thereby pretty much passing whatever they want to pass and forcing President Trump to veto constantly, would be if John Fetterman is the deciding vote. In other words, I don't think that he would necessarily, and he might, for all we know, he could just betray everything that he's done so far, which has been being the only lucid, the only non-radical Democrat in in the Senate. If they have a 52 to 48 majority, including, we'll say, 50 plus their two quote unquote independents that always vote with them, if they have a 52 to 48 majority, then Fetterman won't matter. Okay, so we will lose the filibuster unless, Lord willing, John Thune and the Republicans actually do it preemptively, which they absolutely positively should. That's a discussion for another day. But they will be passing bills left and right. These are bills that will be destructive for the United States of America. That's all there's to it. That's what's at stake, and that's not even taking into account what can and almost certainly would happen in the on the national level, or I'm sorry, on the state level, where there is exponentially more impact on our daily lives at the state and local level. I've said this before. I'll say it again for those who haven't been listening. If you want to know who's going to have the most impact on your life, it's not your congressman, it's not your senator, it's not even the president. The biggest impact on your life directly on a day-to-day basis happens at the city, county, and state level. It's your state legislators, it's your city councils, it's your mayors, it's your governors, it's your sheriffs, it's your district attorneys. Those people have a much more of an impact than whoever your congressperson is. They barely even remember where they're from half the time. They rarely go back unless they're going to vacation. But that's a discussion for another another day. How we desperately need to localize, even at the national level, localize government. But again, discussion for another day. Let's look at what happened last night. And for this, we're going to turn to my second favorite guy over at CNN. And by second favorite, he's the least hated man, as far as I'm concerned, at CNN. Okay, you got Scott Jennings, great. Scott Jennings is amazing. He's a good guy, knows his stuff. Little establishment for me. Okay, I'm not like crazy about him being in Congress or being in government at all. But as a talking head on CNN, he really does bring a certain level of entertainment and a distinct level of sanity to an otherwise insane crew over there, regardless of which show he's appearing on. Second favorite, though, is Harry Enton. He is a leftist. He's a Democrat. He roots Democrat all the time, but he's at least relatively honest when it comes to understanding the numbers. That's his job. Okay, he's supposed to analyze the numbers and then spit out what this all means. and he does a very good job at it. I would argue that of the major networks, he's probably the most skilled at it. Now, again, he does throw in his leftist leanings from time to time, but for the most part, he just spits out the truth, okay, which is hard to find over at CNN. So again, I call him, I wouldn't even say he's least hated. Let's go ahead and say I kind of like the guy, okay? You know, it's he calls it how he sees it, even if that's against the Democrats. Unfortunately, last night, the results of the election were not against the Democrats. They were very much in favor of the Democrats, and it does not bode well for Republicans. Watch.
Right, Trump won that district by 11 points, right? So she's saying she didn't talk about Trump. We just got some new numbers. All right,
yes,
let's
show them up because I was looking at them.
How much ahead, Lindsay? Okay, here we go. All right, so
she's up 3 or 2.5.
She's up.
But look at the percentage of the vote.
Wow.
Yeah.
99% reporting.
Yeah, that means very likely she is going to win in a district.
Yep, 780 ahead. So, look, that's a tiny margin, but you can look at the votes, 99 in. This is looking very good for Emily Gregory right
Correct,
now.
the Democrat. In a district that Donald Trump won by 11 points. That is a massive shift, right? That is a double-digit shift towards the Democrat if that result holds and we have most of the vote in. And what I will say, what is so important, it is happening now in Donald Trump's backyard, but it has been happening across the country. We have seen these massive shifts in these special elections. I looked at all of them, okay, so far to date, the state legislative, the federal special elections, and what
no matter what it's for,
no
it's
matter,
a special election.
Correct, for state legislative or federal for Congress, and what we've seen so far is a shift to the Democrats on average of 12 points. We have seen a shift of 12 points from the Kamala Harris baseline, from what we saw.
Which is about where this race looks like it's
exactly right.
Yes.
This is emblematic, Erin, of what we have seen nationwide, which is a double-digit shift towards the Democrats versus that 2024 baseline.
Right. And actually, well, you could tell me whether my math is right. If
it's slightly larger.
It'd be slightly larger.
Slightly larger.
So what does this mean then for the midterms? Because you're taking, special elections of all sorts in all places. But now let's talk about the national midterm.
Yeah, okay, we'll talk about the national midterms. There's a reason we're talking about this, and it's not just because it's in Donald Trump's backyard, though that's part of the reason why. It is because, historically speaking, special elections have forecasted what will happen in the midterm elections. I went all the way back, since I was in high school, back to the 2005-2006 cycle, and every single time that a party outperformed the presidential baseline in the next midterm election, what we saw was 5 out of 5 times, that party went on to win the U.S. House of Representatives. So what is happening right now in Mar-a-Lago is unlikely to stay in Mar-a-Lago. It is likely to expand nationwide and to expand in the midterm elections as well.
Scary stuff. I will say one thing, I guess a point of hope. There's a couple of points of hope, but one important point of hope that we can look to with the midterm elections, and as it pertains to trends and facts and polls and whatever history, this is a very different election year, and I would argue that every election going forward is going to be very different, even different from the previous election. We are in a state of massive transition, thanks in large part to technology and the way that humans are intellectually evolving or devolving, if you will, thanks to such things as artificial intelligence and mobile devices and TikTok and everything else. We are heading in a direction that is strange at best. And yes, many of these people that have grown up with never knowing how to do pretty much anything outside of the digital world, never knowing how to not have the wealth of human knowledge at their fingertips, and now having an artificial intelligence chatbot or 2 or 3 or 5 that can pretty much tell them what to do, what to think at all times. And unfortunately, that's what's happening to so many of these people. And guess what? They're growing up and getting into voting age. So yes, elections are going to change. And that does mean that election trends can, for the most part, I wouldn't say they can be tossed out the window, but we don't have to fall victim to them when they're against us, nor can we get complacent when they favor us. The trend has always been that the first midterm following a new president, in this case, I know it's his second term, but we'll call him a new president because there was a term in between his. So this is, again, we'll call it Trump's first term, first 2 years, and this has been going on since the 70s. First 2 years, the president gets control, or his party has control of the House and the Senate. But during the midterms, either the House, the Senate, or both fall. In which case, the president, for the remaining 2 to 6 years of their presidency, whether depending upon whether they get 1 or 2 terms, the last part of their presidency, they can't do a whole lot. Just sign executive orders and hope for the best. Hope that they don't have to plug in a Supreme Court justice, for example, if they have to lose the Senate. God forbid that happens. We do expect there to be at least 1, possibly as many as 3 Supreme Court justices picked by President Trump, and it will be devastating if he has to do so with Democrats in control of the Senate. That would change the face of the United States of America. And I go back to what's at stake. We could talk about the filibuster. We could talk about bills. We could talk about vetoes. We could talk about all these various things, cabinet members, confirmations, U.S. attorneys. But by far, the most important potential devastation to the United States of America that could come from this Democrats taking control of the Senate is that if they do, and if the president has to select a Supreme Court justices, those justices that he picks will be very different from the ones that he would have picked had Republicans retained control of the Senate. Now, don't get me wrong, I haven't been exactly pleased with his 3 picks from his first term. They've been okay at best, but if he has to get a consensus pick, somebody that the Democrats would quote unquote allow, oh my gosh, it would be disastrous. It would change the face of the United States of America for decades. So again, that goes back to what's at stake. But now let's look at the trends. Let's look at what happened. Yes, big loss last night. And yes, we can blame this specifically on the complacency of the Republican Party. This is one of those trends that doesn't seem to end, and it needs to end right now. Like I led with, this is your wake-up call. The midterms cannot be another example of how Republicans only really come out in droves and come out to vote during presidential elections. We need people to vote in these midterms. We need the people who voted for President Trump, who gave him the landslide victory in 2024. We need nearly all of them to come back and vote again in the midterm elections. Now you might say, well, but the president's lost popularity, and as a result, blah, blah, blah. Look, the policies are still in play. That includes, of course, the economic policies, which I know they're unpopular now, but we can hope and pray that the economy is looking hunky-dory come midterm election time, at which point, hey, yeah, okay, so that's a positive for Republicans. What about foreign relations? Assuming that we get out of this war with Iran and we don't start any new wars, then that's going to end up being another positive for Republicans. But the big one, I think, is still going to be something that played a major role in the 2024 election, quietly, but it was ever present, and that is the wokeness factor. Democrats are doing their part to try to retain their credibility with the radical base that they have. And as a result, they are still continuing to virtue signal. We yesterday, we had the gubernatorial debate in California got canceled. Why? Because all of the candidates that qualified for the debate were white. That's why it got canceled. That's why USC and whichever media outlet was running it, they decided, you know what? This is too white. I mean, we got 6 people here. All of them are white, and that doesn't look good for California. So let's just go ahead and cancel. Of course, they threw out some odd excuses about the algorithm, and there were complaints and protests and all this other stuff. It comes down to they didn't want to get embarrassed by having California, the wokest state of the nation, the trendsetter for the left, with 6 white people on stage. They just didn't want that to happen. And of those 6 white people, only one of them was a female. 5 straight white dudes and 1 white female, and 4 of them are all crazy. Those are the Democrats, plus the 2 Republicans. It would have been very funny to see, and so they decided they didn't want those optics. There's a lot more to it than that, and I know Chad Bianco has gone on some of the networks. I'm not going to play it because it's a little bit. I don't know. I don't know if I completely agree with his perspective, but there are other reasons for this to happen. Bottom line is that wokeness is still in play. They are still trying to have boys compete in girls' school and girls' sports. They're still trying to put men in women's locker rooms. They're still trying to define what a woman is. And that's going to play well for Republicans, and it needs to be highlighted as much as possible, pushed forward. Then, of course, there's the border component of it. We desperately need ICE to revitalize its image. Again, they've taken a beating, and it's been the most unfair thing I think I've ever seen in politics. The most unfair thing. More unfair, okay, less fair than the way that media has treated President Trump for years. President Trump can take it. President Trump has been hammered by media on and off for the entirety of his life. He knows how to handle it, and it makes sense, sort of, for them to embody him as the pureness of evil against the the Democrat, the wokeness, the leftist mentality. I can understand that, but for them to go after ICE the way that they have, legacy media, Democrats, leftists, this has been extremely unfair because it has, unfortunately, painted them in a negative light. Even many independents and some Republicans, they're like, yeah, we do want deportations because that is still very popular. A majority of Americans do want deportations of all illegal aliens, not just the criminals, not just the violent criminals, I should say, not just the worst of the worst. They really want it to be wholesale. We understand as a people the problem that poses. Unfortunately, the other argument, the other side of this debate is that we want it to happen, but we want ICE to do things differently, and that plays to the Democrats' positioning that they want reforms. Unfortunately, the reforms that they want aren't common sense reforms. These are debilitating reforms. They want to neuter ICE completely. They want to make it to where ICE is deporting like literally nobody, and that's not tenable. That's not allowable. Unfortunately, again, all these unfortunate things. The Republicans have done a piss poor job of communicating that to the people. They keep going back to, well, we've got to, we need to get the things open and yada yada yada. We got to get TSA up and okay, that's great. But why don't you highlight why Democrats are holding America hostage? Now, they can say, but the counter argument there is the Democrats have thrown up bills that will open up TSA, that will pay Coast Guard and everybody else, all of DHS, except for ICE and CBP. Okay, well, that's not tenable either, and here's why. I haven't heard that. I haven't heard that from any Republicans at all. I'm sure somebody has said it. I don't watch all the news. I actually rarely watch the news at all. But I would have heard, had they been making that argument, I would have heard it through the various feeds that I get, and I have not heard that argument made. The argument here is that DHS as a whole needs to be funded, that ICE is part of DHS, and as a matter of fact, President Trump's idea of combining the DHS funding bill with Save America Act makes perfect, beautiful sense. I talked about this on the show yesterday. I'm not going to rehash it. But they do need to make that, the border and illegal aliens and deportations needs to be an issue. The economy, Lord willing, will be allowed to be an issue. Otherwise, if the economy is doing poorly, they're going to have to hide away from it. And here's the thing. If the economy is doing poorly, I don't think there's any messaging the Republicans could do that would save them in the midterms. But let's assume that the economy is doing far better than it is today. Let's assume that the government is open, that the Iran war is over, and then we can focus on the issues. And when we focus on the issues, we can get the messaging right. But we got to get the vote out. People say that all the time. This time, perhaps more so than any midterm in my lifetime, getting the vote out on the Republican side is more important than it has ever been. Because the passion for President Trump is what drove the 2024 midterms. The passion against Kamala Harris is what also helped to drive the 2024 presidential election landslide. We don't have those two things in the midterms. And President Trump does need to come out there and hammer this point home on a daily basis that the last half of his second term will be completely different if Democrats take control. It will be very bad for the United States of America. He needs to come up with the best ways to say that, and multiple ways. Don't just repeat the same thing over and over again. Say it 15 different ways if you have to, but keep saying it. Keep making Americans aware of what's at stake here, because this really is about the future of this nation. I'm not being hyperbolic when I say that. I'm not being a Chicken Little when I say that things will be very different and bad if Republicans don't win the midterms. And by win, I want to see our majorities in the House and Senate go up. We cannot be, I'm less concerned about the House, by the way, but I am more concerned, if we can just retain control of the House, I'll accept it. But in the Senate, we do need to increase our majority. Can we possibly get to 60? No, I don't think so. That would be crazy if we got rid of the filibuster and then got to 60 anyway. That would be like insane. But let's assume that we can't get to 60, but can we get to 55? I think we could. I really do think we could. It all comes down to getting the vote out, stopping voter fraud, okay, getting the Save, this is all, by the way, I forgot to mention, this is all contingent on getting the Save America Act passed. Without it, we're going to have a uphill battle. It's the same uphill battle we've been fighting for years, of course, but I would much rather not have to fight uphill while also fighting the midterm trends and the everything else, the low voter turnout for Republicans. All of these things are challenges, but they would be exacerbated greatly if we don't get the Save America Act passed. So John Thune has to do his job. President Trump has to do his job, but we have a job to do as well, and that is to get the vote out.
The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
Whether you've been a prepper for a long time, or maybe you're just getting started, you're just looking around and thinking how crazy it is. We usually cover the basics. You get your food, you get your water, you get your ammunition. Don't forget your ammo. You get your battery chargers, solar battery chargers, or whatever. But a lot of times I think people will forget their meds. Okay, whether it's chronic meds, antibiotics, I think a lot of people don't even realize that you can stock up on that stuff. They go to the doctor, they go to the pharmacy, and the pharmacist said, oh, here's your 2-month supply or whatever. Well, you can actually stock up on a lot of these meds by going to jdrucker.com/meds. You'll talk to the good folks over at Jace Medical. They can get you a 12-month supply of certain prescription drugs. They can get you emergency meds, all sorts of good stuff, things that you may or may not need, but it's always good to have it on hand, because I guarantee you, even if you don't think you need it today, you might need it in the future. jdrucker.com/meds. I'm a firm believer that the worlds of conspiracy theories and Bible prophecy are going to collide. They're in the process of colliding as we speak. And that's to say that those of us who believe in certain conspiracy theories, maybe not the fringe stuff, maybe not the crazier stuff, but the ones that, well, sort of make sense, that even if we are not necessarily Bible-believing Christians, that we're going to start to become more so, and vice versa. I would argue that many Bible-believing Christians who have ignored conspiracy theories for, well, however long they've lived, they will become more open to them, especially as they start diving into Bible prophecy. That's where I think the conjunction happens. Once we start seeing these conspiracies meld into what the Bible tells us is going to happen during the end times, all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, so they were actually onto something when they were talking about the central bank digital currencies being a pathway through which to have a one world economy, for example. The Bible believers will be like, hey, yeah, this sort of ties in with what prophecy says. And the conspiracy theorists will be like, oh, crap, you mean the Bible talked about this already? And I think there will be this convergence. Now, many of you probably listening right now are like me. We fall into both categories. I do believe in certain conspiracies. I don't see oftentimes how you can't, based upon the track record of these conspiracies. Not the conspiracy theorists. We've seen so many conspiracy theories that get get convoluted and get mixed in with the crazy stuff, because that's the way to quote unquote debunk them. That's the way to gaslight people into not looking at them. You take a legitimate conspiracy theory and then you throw in some crazy stuff so that people who are out there maybe starting to get skeptical about a certain topic, well, they start looking into it and they start seeing these crazies out there that are saying, "Oh no, it's not just bad mRNA. It's actually you're injecting straight up snake venom into your blood, into your veins, and whatever." They combine legitimate conspiracies with crazy conspiracy theories, and that muddies the water. So, yeah, I think that we will see more of a convergence between the two disciplines, and it will all fall, in my humble opinion, it will all fall under the category of Bible prophecy being fulfilled, or at least pointed towards. Central bank digital currencies is, of course, one of the perfect examples. The rise of artificial intelligence and the beast system combining do also point to, wow. So that's how this particular prophecy makes sense, that it could come to pass. Whereas 10, 20, 30, 50 years ago, it'd be like, there's no way that could happen. That's all sorts of weird sorcery. This is crazy. I think that they will be brought together. But even if they're not, even if you're just a conspiracy theorist or just a Bible-believing Christian and not the other, then there's still reason to be both anxious and hopeful for the future. And if you're neither, if you don't believe in conspiracy theories and you don't believe in the Bible, then what the heck are you listening to me for? I'm just kidding. You can listen. I hope you do listen. I hope that you learn something. We have an article over at basedunderground.com titled Globalists Weaponize AI Against Conspiracy Theorists While Fulfilling End Times Deceptions. Perfect segue into today's topic. This month, the World Economic Forum dropped yet another stark warning. Advanced AI and synthetic media are fueling a, quote, systemic global crisis of disinformation that threatens to destabilize democracies worldwide. According to the WEF's own writers, technologies like social media, online chat, and artificial intelligence now allow opportunistic actors to target people with manipulative narratives designed to stir fear, anxiety, and anger. And we've seen this from the left. We've seen it from the globalists. We've seen it from pretty much all of the foul actors out there who are opposed to the Bible, opposed to America, opposed to sovereignty, individual rights, and just good old-fashioned personal responsibility. They like to gaslight. They like to deflect, right? When the WEF says, "Oh my gosh, we have to worry about disinformation," they're right. But what they're calling disinformation is actually oftentimes the correct information. And they are the ones that are spreading the disinformation. You see how that works? Democrats do this all the time. They say, "Oh my gosh, the president, look at what the Republicans are doing, keeping the TSA closed." It's like, what? No, you guys are the ones that stopped funding DHS. You blocked the funding of DHS. You are literally the reason why TSA is not being funded. But by golly, they're like, "No, we actually put out a bill, that would have funded the TSA." Now, granted, we won't tell you that this bill was dumb in that it separates out TSA funding from DHS, but our Trump-hating fans and supporters, they'll believe us. They'll say, "Oh my gosh, the Republicans are making the lines long at airports. They won't pay those poor TSA agents." That's how it works, folks. And that's what the World Economic Forum is doing as well. Their Global Risk Report 2026 ranks mis- and disinformation among top short-term global risks, right alongside geoeconomic confrontation and societal polarization. It remains a severe threat across both 2- and 10-year horizons, allegedly catalyzing or worsening nearly every other risk on their list. In other words, they think that, or not they think, they know this isn't true, but they're pretending like it's true. They say that this misinformation, disinformation, and combined with everything that's happening in the world today is what's going to make everything else worse. And again, they're not inaccurate. They're not directly lying. as far as the cause and the results, they're just lying about who's the source. They, the globalists, are the source of the misinformation and the disinformation. And one can argue that they're also the source of the geoeconomic confrontations and societal polarization that's happening in the world today. I don't think that's a stretch. On the surface, this sounds like a reasonable concern about fake news in the digital age, but for those paying attention, the real story is far darker. This is not a neutral fight against falsehoods. It is the latest phase in a coordinated campaign to label any challenge to the globalist agenda as dangerous disinfo and justify the rollout of AI-powered censorship and narrative control. The biggest challenge for AI is not what a lot of people think. A lot of people are scared of like a what's it called, a Terminator version of, where AI becomes self-aware and goes crazy and starts killing people, and makes humans their enemy. That's not the biggest risk. I'm not saying it's not possible, by the way. I'm saying that that's not the biggest risk of AI. The biggest risk of AI is not that it's going to break, it's that it's going to work. And it's going to work on behalf of those who have control over it. Yes, it will be able to find what the globalists consider to be misinformation or disinformation. It will be able to censor those of us who are trying to spread the truth. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that AI can do today and will continue to get better at doing tomorrow that should be of grave concern. And again, it's not that it will break, it's that it will work. Work on behalf of the bad guys. Globalist institutions have spent years framing skepticism towards central bank digital currencies, digital IDs, climate lockdown, endless wars, and experimental policies as conspiracy theory. Now they are supercharging the effort with artificial intelligence. Recent discussions even explore using AI chatbots to directly, quote-unquote, debunk and reduce belief in conspiracy theories, with studies claiming durable reductions in such beliefs after conversations with large language models. In other words, ChatGPT or Claude or whoever is going to convince you, using facts and knowledge, that this conspiracy theory or that conspiracy theory just isn't real. Now, of course, these will be conspiracy theories that pertain to the AI masters, so to speak, the people that are trying to protect themselves, protect their agenda, protect their satanic path forward. And that's why AI will be very useful in this regard. The message is clear. Question the official narrative on anything, from election integrity to pandemic policy to the rapid consolidation of power in unelected bodies like the WEF and the UN, and you are not a concerned citizen exercising discernment. You are a threat that must be corrected, preferably by AI, before human moderators even have to get involved. They don't want to get their own hands dirty. That's the other thing, is that AI gives them the ability to hide behind something. It's like, oh, no, the AI picked you out for execution, not us. I chuckle, not because it's funny, but I guess in a way it is. This weaponization of AI serves a dual purpose. First, it discredits legitimate opposition by lumping it in with genuine fringe nonsense. Second, it builds the technological infrastructure for a future where truth is whatever the system decides it is, enforced at scale through content moderation, search rankings, financial deplatforming, and eventually social credit style scoring. In other words, people like me who've already experienced 3 or 4 of those various forms of censorship and silencing. It's going to go beyond censorship, by the way, folks. It's going to get to the point to where these voices out there trying to share the truth, trying to warn the people, trying to ignite the people towards action, that we are going to be fully silenced, not just censored, not just deplatformed, not just demonetized. They're going to come after us, and they're going to use AI to find us wherever we are, and then make it to where the best that we can do is stay offline and tend to our homestead. They won't mind as long as we're not spreading the truth to anyone else. And I say that, but maybe they will mind. Maybe they'll just eliminate us altogether. It's possible. You never know. Scripture warned us that this exact dynamic would accelerate in the last days. In 2 Thessalonians 2, the Apostle Paul describes a coming strong delusion sent by God himself upon those who refused to love the truth and so be saved. The passage links that deception directly to the rise of the man of sin and the final rebellion before Christ's return. The globalists' obsession with controlling information flows and shaping cognition through AI is not random. It is a counterfeit attempt to play God, deciding what humanity is allowed to believe, whether the elites push cognitive resilience frameworks or treat human reasoning as something that must be governed like infrastructure. They are building the very mechanisms that could enable the strong delusion on a planetary scale. We've often wondered, we've seen examples of the various delusions that were promoted by God. For example, God put it on Pharaoh's heart. He hardened his heart and made it to where Pharaoh would not let Moses' people go. And then when he finally did, he hardened his heart one last time to go and try to gather the Hebrews back up. That's an example. Now that's with a single authoritative ruler, one who has complete control. I mean, if he ordered his men to do almost anything short of death or perhaps killing their own children, they would have done it because he was supreme. Well, that type of obligation to supreme power doesn't really exist anymore in the world outside of, say, North Korea and to some extent Iran, even though that obviously has been decimated quite a bit. There are still choices, even in communist China, even in Russia or Ukraine or crazy, authoritarian places like London. There are still choices that can be made. And of course, we all have choices here in the United States. So it's going to take more than just a decree from a single person in order to push this forward. They are going to have to utilize, or I should say, employ a certain degree of either accepted compliance or desired compliance. They won't be able to have as much forced compliance as what would be necessary for this great delusion to work. In other words, the use of AI can make it to where the descriptions of certain events in the Bible become a heck of a lot easier to appreciate. Jesus himself warned in Matthew 24 that deception would be a primary sign of the end times, with false Christs and false prophets arising to mislead even the elect if possible. Paul told Timothy that in the latter times some would depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. The current path to pathologize dissent fits the pattern perfectly. We're seeing it in real time. We're seeing it not only manifest, but start to slowly take control. Now, this creeping control of AI is going to eventually, at some point, I don't know if it's this year or next year, maybe the year after that, but I can't see it extending much further than that. The creeping control factors will accelerate, and people will willingly allow it. We're already seeing it in the younger generation. This is why they're now passing bills to try to force kids to read 2 full books a year, right? Why? Because kids don't read books. They don't have to. They can ask AI to give them all the information they need in order to pass a test, to be able to retell the story. It's very similar to the old Cliff's Notes, for those of you old enough to remember those, except in this case it's interactive and questions can be asked. A kid can get an understanding of a 500-page book. They can get that nailed down in half an hour. They can get the basics enough to probably pass a test in about 10 minutes. And if they spend a full hour, asking questions with AI, they could become an expert on a book without ever having opened it at all. That's already happening today. They could even ask the AI to write a book report for them. This is happening too. We're seeing, what was it, last year? I think it might have been MIT or Harvard or some snazzy school where like the valedictorian put up the prompts that he was using, the agents that he was using to run literally everything. In other words, he didn't do any of the work that got him the not valedictorian, magna cum laude at this particular college. Put up on the screen, gloating about how he cheated his way through college. This is becoming more and more common, and it's spreading well beyond college. I've seen it happening within the business world, within every business world. I say business world, it's not just business, it's everything. It's everything, folks. Now, a lot of you are like, well, duh, of course, you're seeing it. But what I've found is that there's a whole lot of you out there who have thoroughly avoided it. And I don't think that you realize the scope and scale that artificial intelligence has essentially taken over many aspects of Western culture, particularly in the United States of America. So who is really spreading these lies? We already know the answer to this. We already know that it's the globalists, but is it more than that? Is this a matter of principalities and powers? Is this something demonic, something even satanic that's driving all this? The quote-unquote New World Order, for those of you who are conspiracy theorists, but not necessarily Bible-believing Christians, that's how you might want to perceive it. For me, I perceive it as, again, the powers and principalities spoken of in the book of Ephesians. These are almost too blatant to ignore. So let's consider the track record. The same institutions. This is why I don't read teleprompters. The same institutions, now clutching their pearls over disinfo, spent years pushing narratives that later unraveled. Russiagate, the Hunter Biden laptop as quote-unquote Russian disinformation, the lab leak theory as a conspiracy. Was that really conspiracy? Did it really just not make sense to hundreds of millions of people worldwide when we were saying, yeah, I don't think that this came from bat soup? Didn't make any sense. And yet so many members of the masses believe that. The solution is never more open debate or transparency. It's always more control, more surveillance, more AI guardrails that just happen to protect establishment narratives while marginalizing outsiders. That's why we still have many people who believe in bat soup. We still have many people who believe that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. We still have many people who think that the 2020 election was legit and Joe Biden really got 81 million votes, far more black votes than even Barack Obama. There are people that think that. I know, it's crazy. But we have a responsibility, you and I do, as watchmen in these times. We must sharpen our discernment. The Bible calls us to test all things and hold fast to that which is good. That includes questioning official stories, but grounding our skepticism in truth rather than speculation. We don't want to go down rabbit holes. Okay, you can take this to the extreme, and the extreme isn't far off from reality. In other words, one of the reasons that I'm always hesitant to tell people don't go too deep into conspiracy theories is because it can grab hold of them and take them down a path that leads them into the fringe, leads them into the darkness. I've seen it. I've seen people. I know people who go down that road who started off as like, wow, this is sort of similar to Revelation. Then all of a sudden they're reading extra biblical texts, and then next thing you know, they're flat earthers. I've seen it literally just like that. And you don't want to go down that road. Now, you can't have too much Bible, to be clear. You can have too much conspiracy theory, but you can't have too much Bible. As a matter of fact, the Bible tells us that we should always be praying, and we should always be learning, spreading the gospel, reading our Bibles, pray, and then pray some more. So you can get too much conspiracy on the conspiracy side, but you can't get too much on the biblical side. There are practical steps that we can and should take. Here's 4 of them. Number 1, we must prioritize primary sources in Scripture over algorithmic feeds. In other words, don't get caught up in just what AI or search engines or anybody tells you. One of the reasons that all of my sites are human curated, and mostly by me and my editors, all of the sites that I use even though they oftentimes will have hundreds of articles posted to them every day. Every single one of those articles was selected by a human. We don't use RSS feeds over at Discern Report. We don't use RSS feeds over at the Liberty Daily. We look at and hand select every single individual article. Now, I'm not going to say that I agree with everything that's posted at all the sites because I'm not the only eyeball on them. I get accused oftentimes, for example, of being anti-Semitic. I'm the furthest thing you can find from being an anti-Semite. But there are those who like to blame the Jews for everything that work for some of the same places that I work. And that's fine. That's how it is. They're welcome to their opinion. I'm welcome to mine. We agree on everything else about 90% of the time. So what's the point of going after that 10%? Nevertheless, I still get the accusations. I don't read the comments sometimes in Rumble anymore because it's like, oh, there's J.D. Rucker, the raging anti-Semite Nazi guy. It's like, no, that's not me. That's whatever. But the point is that you don't let algorithms try to guide you down a particular path. I'm not saying don't use AI. I use AI every single day, but I refuse to allow AI to speak for me. I refuse to allow AI to guide me beyond what I directly ask it to guide me towards. So, for example, I will ask it to help me find Bible verses on a particular topic. I won't ask it to help me to comprehend those Bible verses. For that, I will turn to human beings and I will pray and I will use my own understanding, because it's not that AI is going to be wrong all the time. It'll be right 98% of the time on topics such as that. But guess what that 2% is? That 2% where it's wrong is often very wrong. I've seen sermons written by allegedly by pastors where I can tell they were written by AI because there will be something in the middle of the sermon that's just bald-faced wrong. It's a lie. But a misunderstanding from the AI, or perhaps an intentional re-rendering by the AI, is what causes the discrepancy from the truth. You can't risk that. So yeah, I will ask AI to, find me Bible verses pertaining to this topic. And then I will read those Bible verses. And if I have any questions about those Bible verses, I will refer to human authors over the decades, over the centuries, who have written on this particular topic or that particular topic. I won't let the algorithm, whether it's AI or anything else, to guide any of my direct decisions. Number two, we can and should be building parallel economies and communities less dependent on big tech. I've said many times I'm a humongous fan of localization. That is the key. That is the key to our future. If we are to have one here in the United States of America, beyond, through and into the end times, then it won't be because of the strength and power of the federal government. It will be because of pockets of like-minded, community-driven people. I'm not saying communists. I'm saying community-driven. In other words, people that are wanting to help their neighbors, their direct neighbors. And yes, there may be networks of these that can help to maintain stronger variations of larger community settings. Some would call that a city or a county or a state even. But we can't rely on the current infrastructure, not in the long term. And we have to be ready for if and when that changes. So having parallel economies through bartering, having localization where you know who your ranchers are. I'm literally going today, okay? Today, I will be going to the farmer's market out here near where we live. It's always on Wednesdays. I will be going there with my wife and my youngest, and we will be buying from local farmers. And I will try to get their cards and get their names and try to talk to any of the new ones that I don't recognize and see what we can figure out, see who's close by. Those are the type of connections that are going to make sense. It's not going to be an email that I send them or a contact form on their website. It's going to be looking at them eye to eye, shaking their hand, and finding out where they are and saying, hey, trying to get a feel for where they stand biblically, where they stand and understanding the worldview. it can be challenging sometimes, but if you do it enough, you start to get used to it. You start to see the signs of people that are concerned. And like, for example, with ranchers or farmers or these people that I talk to, these farmers markets, I'm like, yeah, this is great. I've got, I can use my dehydrator or my freeze dryer, so I can store this away for 25 years. And that's sort of like, puffing your chest saying, hey, I'm a prepper, which could lead to me being a conspiracy theorist. I might say things like, praise God, to see what their reaction is. Or sometimes I might just come out and ask them, I'm like, are you guys consider yourselves like a conservative company, a Christian company? Do you maybe even like a conspiracy theorist? And they'll just tell you, yeah, no, I don't really buy into that stuff. Or no, we just really just do the farming. It's like, okay, great. Well, the food's great. I love it. Thanks. There's nothing wrong with making connections with those who aren't like-minded. It just makes it a lot easier when they are. Number 3, teaching our families biblical prophecy so they can recognize the signs instead of falling for the delusions. I think that's, I noted earlier that we have to recognize for the sake of making sure that we can point to where we are on the map. And it will also benefit those who maybe aren't believers today, who will see, oh, wow, the Bible said that this is going to happen. Here it is happening. It must be correct. Therefore, I need to look into the Bible. And that's an idealistic way of looking at it, but it can happen. I think it almost certainly will happen. But there is also the protective aspect of it. People say, you know what, I don't really look into Bible prophecy too much. I think it's a distraction from the gospel. No, I think it's a reinforcement of the gospel. People that separate that out and say, you know what, I don't really look into Bible prophecy. I read the rest of the Bible. It's like, I just wonder to myself, how could you possibly come to that conclusion if you've read any of the Bible? The Bible says specifically that you're supposed to read the Bible. The book of Revelation specifically says that those who read it and they that hear the words of the prophecies written therein will be blessed. So why wouldn't you? I mean, sort of a no-brainer. But I think that the reason that it is so important is that if these strong delusions start to affect people, they will be less likely to be, and I'm talking about affecting Bible-believing Christians, they will be less likely to succumb to the delusions if they have an understanding of that Bible prophecy. And then number 4, speaking truth boldly while rejecting fear-based emotional manipulation from any side. And that's including from our side, my side. Okay? Just because I feel as if I always speak the truth on these shows, that doesn't mean that you have to necessarily agree with everything I say. We do have to speak boldly. We have to reject those who promote ideas that are negative. And that does include those in the Bible-believing world as well as those in the conspiracy theory world. I mean, no, I'm not going to go too much deeper into that. That's going to take us into a very long show. But I will take note of that right now. And I will remember to do a show on speaking boldly and rejecting fear-based emotional manipulation from any side. The great disinfo war is not coming, it is here. The globalists are not merely reacting to AI risks, they are harnessing AI to enforce their vision of the future, one where resistance is preemptively labeled and neutralized. Yet the ultimate victory is already written. Strong delusion may ensnare those who hate the truth, but for those who love it, the return of the King draws near. Stay awake, stay anchored in the Word. The deception grows darker, but so does the light of Christ in those who refuse to bow to the emerging system. Those of you who are Bible-believing Christians and you don't buy into or you don't get involved with the conspiracy theory side, no worries, okay? No worries whatsoever. As long as you have your salvation, as long as you feel truly connected to Jesus Christ, as long as you are saved and reborn, as long as you are living your life as a new person, I don't think that I truly believe that you'll be fine with or without the conspiracy theories. For those of you who maybe have more concerns, maybe the conspiracy theories will help you understand and appreciate just how right the Bible is. Now, on the other side, though, if you are, say you're a conspiracy theorist, but you don't believe in the Bible, I would strongly recommend rethinking that position, reading your Bible, coming to the conclusion based upon what is clearly written in there. And I mean, it can't be more crystal clear that these times that we're in, whether this is the end time or a precursor to the end time, it fits too perfectly for you to not acknowledge this. Okay, even if you might say, well, but it's lies and manipulation. Is it really? You might say, oh, but the Quran says this and yada yada yada. Does it really? It doesn't. The only true writing on the end times comes from the Bible itself. And if you have any questions about that, any concerns, if you have any doubts, there are people that you can consult, and you can definitely feel free to ask me. I'm not an expert on anything. I like to dive into a whole bunch of stuff, right? But that doesn't make me an expert. But I'm willing to talk to you about these things as best as I can. You can always reach out to me directly by going to jdrucker.com/talk. That's jdrucker.com/talk. That comes directly to me. It doesn't get filtered. It doesn't get sent through some algorithm. It doesn't get sent through some assistant. I read those. I read all of them. I don't respond to all of them, but I do read them all. And so send your questions or thoughts that way. And be sure to subscribe to our Substack. This particular Substack is basedunderground.substack.com. You'll get, probably 3 or 4, maybe 5 emails max in a week, all attached to either shows or other articles that can benefit you from both a conspiracy theory perspective as well as from a biblical perspective. God bless you all.
Okay, let's run.
It seems like just about every conservative podcaster, show host, whatever, in today's podcastosphere has a gold sponsor of some sort. And the unfortunate reality is the vast majority of these gold sponsors will push what's called numismatic coins. The reason they do this, they push these quote-unquote collectible coins, is because they can charge extremely high margins on them. We're talking 10%, 20%, 30%, 40%, 50%, or higher. As hard as it is to believe, that's why they're so focused on these collectibles, because they can build a false value into the price and get people to buy them, to roll over their IRA or whatever. I work with a company that specializes in just straight up bullions, rounds, the stuff that you take it, you weigh it, you see what the price of gold or silver is, and that's how much it's worth. It's not about, oh my gosh, look at this picture of this whatever, whoever, somebody, something on the front. Oh, this is so great. This is amazing. It's going to be worth so much more than just your average silver round, which is what my guy likes to promote. Check him out. His name is Ira. He's a stud, and you can learn more from him by going to advisorbullion.com. That's advisor, BULLION, advisorbullion.com, or easy to remember, jdrucker.com/gold. That's probably the easiest way to do it. jdrucker.com/gold. Ira will walk you through. If you want to just pay cash, you just want to wire a few $1,000s and get it shipped discreetly to your door, and so you can put it in your safe, awesome. If you want to have a rollover or whatever for your retirement account, awesome. Ira can help you with all of that stuff. So check him out. Go to jdrucker.com/gold and get the real stuff. If we do enter at any point in the near future a crap hits the fan situation, an apocalypse, we'll call it. I'm not talking about, just standard emergencies like a fire or power outages or hurricanes, natural disasters, or anything that could take us out for days or even a week or two. I'm talking about major, massive, societal meltdown, that type of crap hitting the fan. If it were to happen, there's a lot of regret that's going to come, especially assuming that in such a scenario, the internet is down. People will no longer be able to, especially Americans, will no longer be able to just say, "Oh, okay, cool, we can do this, or we can do that, or we can learn how to forage, or how to dress a wound, or whatever." Right? All those skills that we currently rely on, we have access to, the wealth of human knowledge, the pretty much everything that is known to humans, we have access to it in our hands, in our smartphones, right? You ask it a question and it'll give you the YouTube video or the article or the Wikipedia or whatever that says, okay, well, this is how it's done. And a lot of these apps nowadays, you could take it and point your phone at a plant and say, is this edible? And it'll say, yeah, well, as a matter of fact, this is whatever, Sorbiferous canosis, and it's edible and has lots of vitamin A. Well, all those things could be gone in an apocalyptic situation. And if they are, what are we going to do? What are you going to do? I guess the important part, it's not what we are going to do. Society itself would not be able to manage it. We are very spoiled here in Western society, especially in the United States of America. And I would say most Americans wouldn't know where to get water if CVS and grocery stores were out of it and the taps weren't spitting it out. Couldn't tell you where the closest body of water is that has fresh water for drinking. Couldn't tell you how to fix that. And I'm not trying to. This isn't. Oh, you guys all suck. This isn't about beating you up or anybody up. This is about making you aware that acquiring knowledge today is extraordinarily important. That gathering knowledge, not just acquiring as far as, oh, you got to learn these new skills. There is also the need for we'll call it off the grid. I like to call it analog information and data. For example, maps, books that show which plants are edible and which ones are not, books on foraging. Little physical books showing us how to do basic first aid, advanced first aid. These are the types of things we should be accumulating if you are in the mindset that at some point in the future, there is a chance, and even if it's a low chance, let's say there's a 5% chance, right, that in our lifetimes, sometime in the near future, we could experience such an apocalyptic change in America. If you think that's the case, then it does behoove us to start learning skills. And here's the thing. It's not like this is going to be wasted. A lot of these you can treat as enjoyable hobbies. I mean, stop and think about, are you fully enjoying yourself when you're watching Netflix? Okay. And if you are, even if you're enjoying yourself, are you acquiring any knowledge that can be of use? And the answer, most of the time is no. Granted, there's documentaries on the various streaming platforms. Most of them are garbage, but some of them are okay. I'm not saying that it doesn't make us smarter, but most of the programming that's on there is designed to make us sit there and absorb and talk about it, text about it on our phones while we're watching. It's just a huge distraction. And if you're spending time with these distractions, wouldn't it make sense to spend time learning stuff? And again, both acquiring as well as collecting information, acquiring skills, or at least getting the materials that are necessary for you to learn those skills in the future. And again, noting that this is all with the assumption that smartphones and internet and apps and all that stuff will be basically useless at some point. Now, I don't want to be a fear monger, a chicken little. I don't want to sit here and say, oh, it's going to happen. Again, if it's a 5% chance, it's a 5% chance. It's 1 in 20. That's a pretty darn, considering what we spend our time on every day, why not invest some of it into learning things that could benefit you in the future, learning how to change your oil. For example, we have a comprehensive article over at discern.tv that goes into detail about a lot of this stuff. Yeah, and it's called Skills That All Preppers Should Be Learning Today Before Something Devastating Happens. It's a pretty comprehensive article. And I was actually going to read portions of it, but I think that the best approach I determined was to go ahead and use technology, but use artificial intelligence to go ahead and discuss the article out loud verbally in ways that I cannot. I'm great at commentary. I'm not very good when it comes to reading things out loud. This is why I was never destined to be a news anchor. I'm sure I could learn if I really wanted to, but by golly, I'm not a teleprompter guy. I generally speak with my eyes closed. I know that sounds weird, but one of the reasons I like to do audio podcasts is because I can close my eyes and just talk directly to you, the audience. And I do, by the way, picture with my eyes closed. I do picture speaking to an audience. I did spend a good chunk of my professional career speaking before audiences, and that's where I'm most comfortable. So, talking to a microphone as if it's me talking to an audience in front of me, that's my jelly roll, I guess you could say. Reading an article, reading a teleprompter, reading a script, that ain't for me. So that's the beauty of having artificial intelligence that can do all of that stuff for you. So here is, pay attention. There's some really good stuff in here. Here is the data based upon this article, the information, and then after it's done, I'll be back to wrap things up with you. There is a peculiar arrogance embedded in modern American life. The assumption that the lights will always come back on, that the pharmacy will always be stocked, that the grocery store shelves will always be full, and that a repairman is only a Google search away. We have outsourced virtually every competency our grandparents possessed to a complex web of systems, services, and supply chains that most of us couldn't begin to explain, let alone sustain. We have become, in the precise and damning sense of the word, helpless. Not by nature, but by design, by the seductive convenience of modernity. And modernity is fragile. The 2021 Texas winter storm didn't care that millions of people had no idea how to survive without electricity. A prolonged cyber attack on the power grid wouldn't pause for anyone who assumed their water would always run hot. A pandemic, an economic collapse, an EMP event, a cascading infrastructure failure. These are not fever dreams of paranoid hermits. They are documented historical patterns playing out on new stages. What separates the person who endures from the one who perishes in those moments is rarely gear alone. It is knowledge. It is skill. It is the capacity to act when every familiar support system has gone dark. The internet is the greatest library in the history of human civilization. You can learn to suture a wound, identify edible plants, tan a hide, build a solar generator, or speak Morse code, all for free right now. But that library depends on the same infrastructure you're trying to learn to live without. The window to acquire these skills, using the tools that make them easiest to learn, may be shorter than any of us would like to admit. What follows is not a hobbyist's checklist. It is a serious reckoning with what it means to be genuinely self-sufficient in a world that could, without much warning at all, stop providing for you. Of all the comforts modernity has given us, none is more deeply assumed than pharmaceutical medicine. We take pills for blood pressure, for infection, for pain, for anxiety, often without the slightest understanding of what alternatives existed before the corner CVS. Should those supply chains fracture, a routine infection could become a death sentence for those who haven't prepared accordingly. This is where herbal and natural medicine stops being a quaint hobby and becomes a survival discipline. For centuries before synthetic pharmaceuticals, human beings managed illness through plant medicine, and much of what they used has since been validated by modern research. Garlic, Allium sativum, has well-documented antimicrobial properties. Yarrow, Achillea millefolium, has been used for millennia to staunch bleeding and reduce fever. Elderberry, Sambucus nigra, has demonstrated antiviral properties in clinical studies. Plantain leaf, the common weed you've probably been pulling out of your lawn, draws out infection and speeds wound healing. Usnea lichen, known as old man's beard, has been called nature's antibiotic for its strong antimicrobial properties. The prepper's natural medicine cabinet should include working knowledge of wound care. Beyond bandaging, you need to understand which plants serve as natural antiseptics. Raw honey, particularly manuka, has been used clinically for wound dressing. Calendula makes an effective healing salve. A poultice of comfrey or plantain can draw out infection and reduce swelling. Knowing how to pack and dress a wound under pressure without sterile hospital supplies is a skill that saves lives. Infection and fever. Echinacea and elderberry can help stimulate immune response during early illness. Willow bark contains salicin, the precursor to aspirin, and can be made into a tea for fever and pain relief. Learning to make tinctures, alcohol-based herbal extracts, infused oils, and decoctions, boiled plant medicines, means you can produce remedies from plants you've grown or foraged rather than depending on a supply chain. Respiratory illness. Thyme and mullein have both demonstrated effectiveness as expectorants. A simple steam inhalation with eucalyptus can provide meaningful relief in respiratory infection. Knowing how to make a chest-clearing herbal steam is not folk nonsense. It is practical medicine that will matter greatly when the nearest emergency room is inaccessible. Pain management. St. John's wort has been extensively studied for mild to moderate pain and nerve pain. Clove oil has been used for centuries as a topical analgesic, particularly for dental pain, a condition that becomes acutely serious in a world without dentists. Beyond plant medicine, every serious prepper should pursue formal wilderness first aid certification. Courses offered through organizations like NOLS, National Outdoor Leadership School, or Wilderness Medical Associates teach you to manage trauma, fractures, dislocations, wound closure, and shock in austere environments without access to hospitals. A basic knowledge of CPR is table stakes. Knowing how to recognize signs of sepsis, how to improvise a tourniquet, how to manage a sucking chest wound, or how to reduce a dislocated shoulder. These are the skills that turn panic into action. The book of Proverbs says, "A prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished." Proverbs 22:3 KJV. It was true 3,000 years ago. It is just as true now. The prudent man has a medicine chest that doesn't depend on FedEx. The modern American has become so detached from food production that most children cannot name the plant a carrot grows on. We have reduced food literacy to knowing which aisle holds the canned goods. In a grid-down world, that kind of ignorance is dangerous. There are two parallel tracks every prepper should pursue: foraging and cultivation. Foraging for wild edibles is among the oldest human skills and one of the most perishable, because almost no one practices it anymore. The critical point that any honest guide must make at the outset is this: only roughly 5–10% of all wild plants are edible. The rest are either indigestible, unpalatable, or lethally toxic. Enthusiasm without knowledge is not just useless here, it is fatal. Elderberries and water hemlock can look similar to the untrained eye, and water hemlock is among the most violently toxic plants in North America. That said, once learned, foraging transforms the landscape around you from inert scenery into a living pantry. Dandelions, despised by every suburban HOA, are entirely edible from root to flower and are rich in vitamins A, C, and K. Cattails, found near virtually any body of fresh water, have been called the supermarket of the swamp because every part of the plant, root, shoot, pollen head, is edible depending on the season. Wild garlic mustard, wood sorrel, lamb's quarter, stinging nettles, once blanched, wild ramps, acorns, leached of tannins, and a vast variety of berries and nuts offer nutritional sustenance to those who know what they're looking at. The proper way to learn foraging is not by reading a single article or downloading an app. It is by going out with an experienced forager, plant by plant, in your specific bioregion, and building identification knowledge through repeated, confirmed observation. Purchase a high-quality regional field guide. The Peterson Field Guides series and the Regional Medicinal Plants series, Northeast, Southeast, Midwest, are excellent resources. Learn the edible plants in your county before you need to rely on them. Know their toxic look-alikes. Know which parts are edible and which are not. Know which require cooking and which can be eaten raw. Gardening and food production are the longer game. A kitchen garden that produces tomatoes and zucchini in the summer is a start. But survival gardening demands more. Understanding how to save seeds, crucial since hybrid seeds don't reproduce true to type, how to extend growing seasons, how to compost and maintain soil fertility without synthetic fertilizers, and how to grow calorie-dense staples like beans, squash, potatoes, and corn alongside nutritionally rich greens and herbs. Learn your USDA hardiness zone, know your last frost date, know which crops can be stored through winter without electricity. Root cellaring is its own discipline and an extraordinarily valuable one. Hunting, fishing, and trapping round out the protein column. A hunting license is cheap. The skill it licenses is priceless. More preppers should be learning to track game, read wildlife sign, field dress, and butcher large animals, and preserve meat through smoking, salting, and curing, without refrigeration. Fishing remains one of the most calorie-efficient forms of wild food procurement available. Learning to set fish traps and snares for small game multiplies your capacity for food acquisition dramatically, particularly when you cannot afford to expend all your energy on active pursuit. Food preservation is the bridge between abundance and survival. Our ancestors understood this intuitively. They canned, fermented, smoked, dried, and pickled not as a hobby, but as a necessity. Water bath canning and pressure canning are learnable skills with a modest upfront investment in equipment. Fermentation, making sauerkraut, kimchi, kvass, and lacto-fermented vegetables, requires nothing more than salt, water, and a clean jar. Dehydrating food for long-term storage extends shelf life dramatically. Learning to smoke and salt meat preserves protein when you have a surplus and no refrigeration. These are not lost arts. They are just temporarily unfashionable. A human being can survive roughly 3 weeks without food. Without clean water, you have 3 days, and they will be miserable ones. This makes water procurement and purification the single most non-negotiable skill set in any prepper's repertoire. Municipal water supply depends on electricity for pumping and treatment. When the grid goes down, so does reliable municipal water, often within hours. Every prepper should understand multiple methods of water purification. Boiling, the most reliable, kills virtually all pathogens. Chemical treatment with iodine or chlorine tablets. Mechanical filtration. Gravity filters like the Berkey are excellent for base camp use. The Life Straw and Sawyer Squeeze for personal portable use. And UV purification, effective but battery dependent. Beyond purification, water sourcing is its own discipline. Rainwater harvesting, setting up barrels under roof downspouts, is legal in most states and provides a meaningful supplement. Knowing where every natural water source within a 10-mile radius of your home is located is basic operational awareness. Understanding how to read terrain to find water, look for vegetation, valleys, drainage patterns, is more advanced but learnable. Understanding how to dig a seep well or how to extract water from vegetation in dry conditions is the outer edge of the skill set and worth knowing. In the economy that follows civilization's disruption, the person who can fix things will be among the wealthiest people alive. The person who can only consume them will be desperate. Consider how completely we have abandoned the mechanical arts. The average American cannot change their own oil, replace a broken window pane, wire a light switch, fix a leaking pipe, or sharpen a handsaw. We call someone. We order it on Amazon. We let the warranty handle it. All of those options disappear the moment the infrastructure that supports them goes dark. Basic automotive mechanics is a starting point. Understanding how an internal combustion engine works, how to do a tune-up, replace belts and hoses, fix a flat, diagnose basic electrical problems, and maintain a fuel system could mean the difference between mobility and being stranded. In a prolonged crisis, older vehicles, those without complex computerized systems, will be more valuable than newer ones because they can be repaired with hand tools by someone who knows what they're doing. Carpentry and basic construction become essential when you need to repair or fortify shelter. Knowing how to frame a wall, install a door, patch a roof, build raised garden beds, or construct a root cellar is not just practical, it is leverage. The person with these skills will be in demand in any community trying to rebuild. Plumbing and electrical basics, understanding how your home's water supply and drainage system works, how to shut off water at the main, how to replace a fixture, how to wire a simple circuit or install solar panels, make you capable of maintaining a habitable home without calling a professional. Blacksmithing and metalworking are longer-term skills that reward serious investment. The ability to fabricate and repair tools from raw steel is, in a truly extended collapse scenario, foundational to any community's capacity to function. Sewing and textile repair seem mundane until you consider that in a world without manufactured clothing supply chains, the person who can make and repair garments from raw material, or even just mend what exists, provides an extraordinarily valuable service. Learning to sew buttons, patch tiers, reinforce seams, and eventually construct basic garments by hand is not optional in a prolonged crisis. Gunsmithing basics deserve mention here as well. Firearms are the prepper's primary tool of defense and a critical hunting implement. Understanding basic cleaning, maintenance, jam clearing, and common repairs, and for the advanced hand-loading your own ammunition, is the difference between a weapon that functions reliably and a club. It would be easy in a long article on practical skills to breeze past what every wilderness survival instructor knows are the true fundamentals. They deserve serious attention. Firecraft is more complex than it appears. Starting a fire with a Bic lighter is trivially easy. Starting one in wet conditions, at high altitude, without modern fire-starting tools, using materials you have gathered from your environment, that requires practice. Every prepper should be proficient with a ferrocerium rod, should understand the principles of tinder preparation, fire lay construction, and fire management for both cooking and warmth. Fire starting is a perishable skill, meaning it degrades with disuse. Practice it regularly. Shelter construction, knowing how to build an effective improvised shelter from natural materials, addresses the immediate threat of exposure, which kills far faster than starvation. Understanding the principles of insulation, moisture management, wind protection, and ground insulation allows a person to survive nights in conditions that would otherwise be lethal. Land navigation without GPS is a skill that has been nearly exterminated by the smartphone. The GPS signal can be jammed, can fail, can run out of battery. Map reading, the ability to interpret topographic maps, understand contour lines, identify terrain features, and correlate what you see on a map with what you see on the ground. Combined with compass use, including declination adjustment and triangulation, is fundamental. This is not a difficult skill to learn. It simply requires investment and practice. Navigating by the stars, celestial navigation, is a deeper skill that requires more study, but provides complete independence from any manufactured technology. In a communications blackout, information is power, and the person with a working radio that can send and receive across distance holds enormous community value. Ham radio, amateur radio is the prepper's communication answer. With over 750,000 licensed operators in the United States and 6 million worldwide, the amateur radio network is genuinely robust, and the equipment is increasingly affordable and capable. A technician class license from the FCC requires roughly 10 hours of study and opens access to regional VHF and UHF networks. A general class license opens HF, shortwave frequencies, and enables communication over continental distances, the ability to reach operators hundreds or thousands of miles away without any internet or cellular infrastructure. The important thing about ham radio is that it must be practiced regularly to be useful in crisis. Many preppers purchase a radio and let it sit in a drawer. This is nearly useless. Getting licensed, joining local emergency preparedness nets, practicing the equipment, and learning how to operate under field conditions, including solar-powered charging of equipment, turns a radio purchase into a genuine capability. Beyond ham, every prepper should understand how to signal for help without electronics. Signal mirrors, ground-to-air signals, whistle codes, and the basics of Morse code. These are durable skills that require no battery. No skills list is complete without acknowledging the dimension that determines whether all other skills can actually be deployed. Mental resilience. The statistics from wilderness survival emergencies are sobering. People with more gear and more theoretical knowledge than their rescuers have died because they panicked, made poor decisions under stress, and could not tolerate uncertainty. Mental fortitude, the capacity to remain calm in the face of genuine danger, to prioritize clearly when everything is wrong, to tolerate discomfort without becoming paralyzed, and to lead others when leadership is desperately needed, is itself a learnable and practicable skill. Meditation, deliberate exposure to discomfort, cold showers, fasting, difficult physical training, scenario planning and mental rehearsal, and the cultivation of what military psychologists call stress inoculation. These are not soft concerns. They are the operating system on which every other skill runs. Community is equally critical. The lone wolf prepper is a Hollywood invention. Real resilience in crisis has always been communal. Know your neighbors. Build relationships with people who have complementary skills. Understand how to negotiate, de-escalate conflict, and maintain social cohesion under pressure. The ability to build and maintain trust in a community that must cooperate to survive is itself one of the most valuable skills on this entire list. We live in an extraordinary moment. Every skill described in this article can be learned through free YouTube videos, downloadable PDFs, online courses, and community workshops. Right now, today. The knowledge of centuries has been digitized and made accessible. The herbs our great-grandmothers used, the construction techniques that built this civilization, the navigation methods that opened continents, all of it is available for the learning. That window is only open because the grid is still running. This is the irony the casual observer misses. The very technology that might one day fail us is, right now, the most powerful tool we have for preparing to live without it. Every hour spent learning to start a fire from friction, to identify plantain and yarrow and elderberry in the field, to suture a wound, to read a topographic map, to operate a ham radio, to preserve a harvest. Every one of those hours is an investment that cannot be repossessed, cannot be jammed, cannot be taken down by a cyber attack. Skills live in the body and the mind. They do not require a signal. The American tradition of self-reliance, the frontier ethic that shaped this nation's character, was never just philosophy. It was practice. It was the daily engagement with the real world that produced competent, capable, adaptive human beings. The Progressive Project has spent a century building systems that replace that competence with dependence. The irony is exquisite. The more we have been taught to trust the experts, the systems, the government agencies, the supply chains, the more catastrophically helpless we become when any of those fail. The old wisdom is not obsolete. It is waiting, and the time to retrieve it is now, while the internet still works, while the courses are still accessible, while the seeds can still be ordered online and delivered to your door. Lay up wisdom as a man lays up provisions, before the storm, not during it. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, counseled Solomon. Consider her ways, and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. Proverbs 6:6-8, KJV. The ant does not wait to see the storm. It works while the season is good. So should we. I like how it we pulled from Proverbs and it doesn't say it right. It's funny because this is the first time that, the first couple of times that I used AI to read portions of an article. I had I had listened all the way through, and it was pretty flawless, right? This time I caught, what, 4 or 5 different AI AI problems. Wounded. You got to heal your wounds, stuff like that. Proverbs 6:6-8. No, that was Proverbs 6, as in chapter 6, verses 6-8, was how that should have been understood. Anyway, not horrible, and much better, by the way. I guarantee you, far better than if I had tried to read all of that directly myself. Not fear mongering here, like I keep saying. It's just if you stop and think about it, if you think about it logically, if you pray through it, I think that you'll come to the conclusion that your time can be better spent learning skills that you can use in the future, skills that even if there's no apocalypse in our lifetime, right? Even if things are just hunky dory or things are whatever, having these skills, this still benefits you. There are still advantages to learning to do certain things like changing your oil. So I just consider how much time you spend doing things that are completely non-productive. Try to replace some, if not all, of that time doing things that are productive, such as learning and acquiring skills and knowledge. And it doesn't even just have to be about the apocalypse, okay? I mean, this is general. In general, we should be using the time that we're given here on this planet to advance the gospel first and foremost, to educate ourselves, reading the Bible, praying as much as possible, and then if we need quote unquote free time, then let that be doing something again productive. Learning the difference between elderberries and whatever that other I don't remember, some kind of poisonous berry that looks like an elderberry. I don't want to eat the poisonous berry, so I want to figure out which berry is which. That's my that's my new jelly roll. There we go. So good stuff there. Be sure, if you like this podcast, if you like these articles, be sure to subscribe. It's free. Subscribe over at lateprepper.substack.com. That's my newsletter. I put out 2, 3, 4 a week, and they're just very straightforward. Just, hey, this is what to do. If you're late to the prepper game, this is what you can do to survive. And even if you're an experienced prepper, it's still good. I mean, there's still great information in there. I have found that as somebody who's been doing preparedness and prepping and survival skills for decades now, that I still, come upon stuff that's like, wow, I had no idea. I'm not talking about the advanced stuff. There's always going to be advanced stuff that we need to learn. I'm talking about basics, okay? I'm still learning the basics, and this is after over a decade of doing it. So, yes, even if you are an experienced prepper, I would recommend subscribing. It's lateprepper.substack.com. God bless you all, and let's survive whatever is coming together.
The cadet's logic is sound.